Some video games are touted up as the next big thing and it gets us excited, ready, and when we wake up in the morning, we've got a calendar counting down to when such things are going to be released. And then they are released, and they're terrible, and instead of waking up feeling excited, we now cry and cry for the rest of the day. This is why you should never actually buy into video games too much, especially because they are toys, but hell, we all make mistakes. It happens time and time again though, a video game seems like it's going to change the world, and then the people controlling it muff it all up. My name is Simon Miller, and this is 8 video game flops that should have been huge. Number 8, Daikatana. I find Daikatana hilarious because everything was there for it to be massive. It was from John Romero, the man who had literally changed the gaming industry with Doom, and he had a bigger budget than my head to play with. So he had talent, and he had cold hard cash. How can that flop? Well, it did. It started badly when posters for the game started to appear that proclaimed Romero was going to make you his bitch. To this day, I'm not exactly sure what this meant, unless there was some clause that if you did buy Daikatana, Romero was going to come around your house and just whip your ass for real. It made absolutely no sense, and still doesn't. Plus it's massively offensive, so a win-win right there. From here, it was just downhill. Despite developer Iron Storm being made up of genuinely smart people, just weeks before its 1999 release, they decided to change Daikatana's engine, and guess what? Terrible idea. That would be like having your leg amputated and having a new one attached a week before the start of the new football season. And lo and behold, it wrecked the game. It was a mess on release simply because there hadn't been enough time to make this work. And it's up there with one of the worst decisions in gaming history. It's the digital equivalent of the Maginot Line. All be told, around 40 million was ploughed into this, and safe to say it didn't balance the books and was considered a disaster by everyone who even thought about it. Number 7, Duke Nukem Forever. Ah, of course, what else? Arguably the biggest flop and joke in gaming history, Duke Nukem Forever's story is so stupid it's hard to believe. It was just one bad idea after another bad idea. You'd have every right to be insulted by it. All you really need to know is that originally this was meant to be released in 1998, and yet didn't find its way out there till 2011. If you can't do maths, that's 13 years. Ridiculous. The issues were endless too. Ideas kept changing, the engine was updated constantly to try and keep up with the ever-evolving industry. Developers left, developers joined, it was delayed over and over. Why this wasn't just canned, I don't know, and why Gearbox decided to save it and actually put out a version in 2011 is anybody's guess. And while it wasn't as bad as it could have been, it was drier than sand and basically had no redeeming features whatsoever. It was like finding some relic in an Indiana Jones movie, and there was no fun to be had. Just sadness. It affected multiple developers and lost tons of cash throughout the years, and you would guess now the Duke is dead. And who would really want to resurrect him today anyway? Number 6, Acarim. Acarim is a weird one because on paper it should have been the biggest game of 2006. Not only did it look great, but it played great too, and everybody loved it on release. It won numerous awards by the year's end, and reminded everyone that developer Clover had a real knack for their craft. That was the plan anyway. Clearly the mass audience didn't feel the same because despite all the praise in the world, nobody bought it when it was released. Selling a paltry 270,000 copies in North America in its first 12 months, it essentially ruined the company, and shortly afterwards they closed their doors. Because of course they did. The money they must have lost there. Let's not think about it. To this day it doesn't make sense because Acarim is very good. A Zelda clone that actually does it right, takes those ideas, makes them feel new and unique, and adds in a whole load of new ones too. But let's face it, if a game kills the studio, it's not done very well. Number 5, Grim Fandango. Okay, so this one hurts me as a human because Grim Fandango is wonderful. One of the best point-and-click games ever. It also features Manny Calavera, who is such a good main character, I don't even know where to start. He was just a delight, and the game itself was equal parts hilarious and touching. But man, did it bomb. For whatever reason, and you'd imagine a large part was due to the genre itself just losing interest, LucasArts' tale of the Mexican underworld fell hard, only managing to sell 500,000 copies years after it first came out. This was mad at the time because the developer had been responsible for the likes of Monkey Island and Sam & Max, which had proved massively popular. With gamers falling in love with first-person shooters harder than ever though, there was no room for a more cerebral, slower-paced experience. Grim Fandango found that out the hard way. It's been remastered for current consoles, and I highly suggest you do go and play it, especially as the internet is much bigger than it was in the late 90s, so you won't get horrendously stuck, because geez, this could be hard. Number 4, Lair. Lair always cracks me up just because I was at Sony when this was in the works and announced to the company. Clearly seen as one of the highlights of the upcoming PS3's launch lineup, executives told a packed room full of people that the big reveal halfway through the game was going to be that holy shit, Your character had actually been fighting for the bad guys and you had no idea, because that has never been done before. Unsurprisingly, this news was met by utter silence. It wouldn't have made a difference anyway, because Lair sucked balls. Asking you to use the motion control in the DualShock to move the damn dragon was just infuriating, and it was so riddled with bugs, you'd have been better off snapping the disc and hurling it out the window. Furthermore, Sony was so mad at the reviews, it decided to send out a guide to journalists, letting them know how to critique games going forward. Great plan. This flopped and did so to such a degree, developer Factor 5 was shut down soon after. Damn. Number 3, E.T. As you may imagine, knowing an E.T. video game was going to be released in 1982 was pretty exciting. Gaming was this new burgeoning beast, and E.T. was the hot-in thing. Everyone loved that alien, even if he did look like an old woman. The two of these colliding into one big ball of happiness was surely going to change the world. And it did. For all the wrong reasons. Not only did Atari spend a fortune getting the rights and then securing the developer they wanted, but it also made a huge song and dance about it before release. This was the game everyone wanted, and if you didn't have it, you were going to be shunned from society for being out of the loop. Man, what a massive lie that was. Completely bombing almost from day one, word of mouth quickly spread that this was garbage, and that, in fact, sorting out your own garbage would actually be a better use of your time. Atari was able to shift 1.5 million copies, but that just meant they had 3 million copies left, and what did they do? Buried them in the desert. Yep, in one of the weirdest moves in gaming history, a publisher just took something it didn't want and literally put it underground. You could argue this killed the company in the long run, and it was never the same afterwards. That's quite the flop. Number 2, Shenmue. I find it amazing people are still tooting Shenmue's horn in 2017, and it's even more crazy we're actually getting a third entry. This bombed so hard when it came out on the Dreamcast first time around, it's a mystery why anybody would be shouting for more. You're just throwing money down the drain. Costing $47 million, it had to do well, and in many ways it did, in the sense it influenced a lot of games that came afterwards. It had a day-night cycle, for example, which at the time was incredibly novel. To say it was ahead of its time is more than fair. It didn't work though. As well as being riddled with technical issues and faces that were deader than Elvis, it only found a niche audience and essentially helped to kill the Dreamcast altogether. This was meant to be the game that took it to new heights, and instead, it wrecked everything. Now you see why the third is crowdfunded. Can't lose that amount of cash again. Be suicide. Number 1, Driver 3. Drive 3, Drive 3, Drive f***ing hell, whatever it's called, was one of those games that everybody salivated over because of how good it should have been. Coming off the back of Driver 2 that had both a normal name was pretty damn good. If said leap could happen again, there's no way a third entry wouldn't rock. And that was the problem. For some reason, it seemed no one at Atari in 2004 had any idea how to move the series on. So Driver 3 was exactly the same, even though it took around 5 years to develop. What was a real kick in the teeth was that the single-player campaign only lasted 3 hours, although I imagine it took most people longer because the controls were akin to ramming a knife into your hand over and over again. Given that the publisher had ploughed millions into this, it wasn't that much of a surprise when they announced a $16.9 million loss at the end of the quarter. Don't rest on your laurels, folks. That's what we learned here. All this content is supported by Patreon, so please do click the link in the description and support. Like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment. Come talk to me on Twitter at SimonMiller316, and I'll see you again soon.